Our featured guest this month is one of the most well-known and respected names in science fiction and fantasy. Comic book conventions, pop culture expos, and geek forums all around the world. And that's because he is Wil Wheaton. You know him as Wesley Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Geordi LaChance in the classic coming-of-age drama Stand By Me. He played a fictionalized version of himself on the CBS hit series The Big Bang Theory, and has lent his voice to so many animated shows and audiobooks we've completely lost count. An incredible body of work that includes Family Guy, Teen Titans, Guardians of the Galaxy, Batman, Legion of Superheroes, and Ready Player One and Two, just to scratch the surface. Outside of acting, Wil is an avid poker player, Dungeons & Dragons aficionado, video gamer, podcast host, LA Kings fan, comic book writer, and active blogger on wilwheaton.net. His latest work is an annotated memoir, Still Just a Geek, in which he revisits his 2004 collection of blog posts, Just a Geek. Releasing this month, the book is a raw, insightful, and inspiring story about Wil's struggles with depression, his personal challenges with family, acting, and love, and finding fulfillment and passion in all aspects of life. I had the pleasure of speaking with the stellar Southern California native to talk about his early life and acting experiences, comic books, Star Trek, working with Mark Hamill, and time traveling back to those early years in preparation for Still Just a Geek. Here's what Wil had to say. Well, I, for one, cannot believe we are sitting here with the one and only Wil Wheaton. Wil, welcome to Everything Zen.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We're here to talk about Still Just a Geek, an updated, annotated version of your 2004 memoir, Just a Geek. What makes this book unique and different from its predecessor?
When Just a Geek was written in 2004, I was almost 30, and I was kind of looking back on my teenage years and what being part of Star Trek and a young, early kind of first-wave blogger meant to me, as I was also settling into my relatively new life as a husband and a dad. Still Just a Geek is what happened when I opened that book up for the first time in 20 years as an almost 50-year-old, looked back at almost 30-year-old me, saw things I liked, things I was appalled by, things that I had thought were incredibly important that I had completely forgotten about. And most importantly, I saw how much I had changed as a person and as a writer. And I had a lot of thoughts about those changes. I had places where I thought I was very hard on myself 20 years ago. I had places where I saw that I wasn't entirely honest with myself and readers 20 years ago. And I addressed all of it in what turns out to be extensive annotations. A good way to think about Just a Geek and Still Just a Geek is like, we're sitting down. I've got the original book, Just a Geek, in my hands. I'm reading it to you. And every now and then I sort of look up from it and reflect on what I've just read from 20 years ago. That's the experience of the book, if I've done it right.
If you could travel back in time, what advice or guidance would you give your younger self?
It's such a difficult question to ask because I went through a lot. I suffered a lot. I struggled a lot. And as a consequence of all of that, as a result of everything that the 20-something version of myself survived, I have an amazing life now. I love everything about my life. I am so happy. I am so grateful. I cannot say enough incredibly good things about how wonderful my life is. I don't know if I would listen to myself. I don't know how much credibility 20-year-old me would give 50-year-old me. But, when I look back over the last 20 years of my life, it seems to be around the time that I was like 30, 32, 33, somewhere around there. I kind of realized that much of my life was a lie, that I never wanted to be an actor. I never wanted to be famous. I don't like attention from people I don't know. And that since I was 7 years old, my mother had kind of forced me to be the actor she wanted to be. She wanted to be the stage mother of a famous actor and benefit from everything that comes along with that. So when I was 7, she made that choice for me and decided that I was going to do that. And for the remainder of my childhood, when I said, please let me be a kid, please let me be a kid, I don't want to do this anymore, she would manipulate me and gaslight me, make me feel guilty, tell me that she had given up her career so that I could have a career. Because, you know, when a kid's 7, that's a thing they do. And when I really, really, really recognized that, when I had to confront in my early 30s, I am not a child to my mother. I'm a thing. She loves me, but she loves me the way a girl loves her dolls. And the man who was my father never loved me, doesn't like me at all, and has made that very clear. And nothing I will ever do will ever be good enough for him. Nothing I can do will ever change these two things. I realized all of this when I was in my very early 30s, right after Just a Geek was written. And it was so painful and so difficult to deal with that I just basically became a drunk instead of dealing with the trauma. And in 2016, my wife was like, I'm super worried about you. And I agreed, decided to stop drinking. And that began this incredible healing journey where I really did have to confront the things that were painful and traumatic, and I couldn't hide from it anymore. I had to process and work through PTSD from childhood abuse and trauma, from emotional neglect, emotional and physical abuse from the man who was my father. I had to work through all of that. If I could go back and give my younger self any advice at all, and I just don't know if I would listen to it, it would be, dude, when you have this realization, it hurts and it is terrible. And diving into the bottom of the deepest well of alcohol you can find to avoid it is not going to do anything to make that pain go away. It's actually going to make your life a lot worse. And every day, it seems, for the last couple of years, I've been talking with my wife about a revelation I had and how I acted on it and how some particular part of my trauma was healed and how I've recovered from certain things and how I wish I had done it when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And I recognized a few days ago that when I say I wish I had done this when I was younger, what I actually mean is I wish I had confronted this and found the strength and support from my friends to confront the reality of my trauma and heal it instead of trying to avoid it. I wasted 10 years of my life just getting drunk and avoiding it. And I regret that. I'm sad about that. I'm great now. Everything is cool. I'm really happy about it. I feel really, really good about my life. But if I could just be like, dude, here's the thing that like you just don't need to do to yourself, it would be that. But all the other things, you know, the like, would you have quit Star Trek? Would you have said yes to this movie or no to that movie? Would you have gone to this place or, you know, all of those things, every single one of those choices has rippled out in a way that has butterfly affected me to where I am right now. So I wouldn't change any of those things. It's just that big block of time in my life where I was just like, I'm in so much pain, I'm going to avoid it. I wish that I had not done that.
Right. And a lot of people probably have similar experiences growing up. Turning toward our listeners out there and readers of Still Just a Geek, what do you hope they take away from your experiences?
That we're allowed to change, that we are allowed to make mistakes when we're younger and learn and grow from them. And when we look back on the things that we said or did that we aren't proud of, that you know, we may have a reaction along a continuum from like mild embarrassment to absolute revulsion. That's terrific. It means that we've changed. It means that we've grown and changed, and that's wonderful. And that it is okay to make mistakes so long as we own them, learn from them, and grow to be better people. as a result of learning from them. I also hope that anyone who has ever felt like they haven't been given the opportunity to pursue their own dream for whatever reason, for everyone who has felt like I have been pushed onto a path that I never wanted to be on, you don't have to stay on it. I learned that. It was really hard. It took me until my life was nearly halfway over to realize that. So if somebody can figure that out 20 or so years before I did, you just get to live a longer life where you're being really happy. And I just hope that my fellow trauma survivors, my fellow travelers in the delightful world of mental illness will feel seen, will feel validated, and will feel less alone, because that's the way I feel whenever anybody reads any of my work and says to me, oh man, I saw some of myself in what you said.
On a lighter note, long before Stranger Things, there was Stand By Me, without a doubt, one of the greatest coming-of-age films of all time. When was the last time you watched the film, and has your perspective on it changed over the years?
I haven't seen it in a while. I think the last time I actually watched it from start to finish was with Rob Reiner and Corey Feldman for one of the DVD releases. We watched it and did a full-length feature commentary about it. I have seen Jerry O'Connell quite a bit over the last year or so. I host the Ready Room for Paramount Plus, which is the online hub to all things in the Star Trek universe. Jerry is a voice actor on Star Trek Lower Decks, and I've had the great privilege of interviewing him a number of times. I just did his show, The Talk, to promote Still Just a Geek. It was good to see him again. Rob Reiner recorded a message for us telling us how much he loves us and how proud of us he is. That was unbelievably cool. But the viewing of Stand By Me that I think has been most consequential in my entire life would have been in the neighborhood of 15 to 18 years ago, when my then stepchildren, who are now my adopted children, were probably like 12 and 10 or so. We sat down and watched it together. And for them to see me when I was their age telling a story about people who are their age was real interesting for me. Stand By Me is a very different movie for an adult to watch than it is for a kid to watch. It communicates two very different stories. And seeing it as an adult opened my eyes to a lot of things about myself that I hadn't been aware of.
You co-wrote the comic The Guild Fox back in 2012. I did. What did you enjoy about that experience, and would you consider writing more comic books in the future?
Yes, I absolutely would. I would love to. I'm actually talking with somebody right now in the hopes that we can make a thing come together. I don't know if it'll happen, but they've got the pitch and we'll see where it goes. I absolutely loved it. And it's so interesting to me that you bring it up, because I just came across some old blog entries from 2012. And one of them is this comprehensive essay on how I wrote it. And the creative process, and how Felicia and I worked together, and what each of us brought creatively to the table. And it was a wonderful memory to have. It's so interesting to me, as I have spent all this time with Just a Geek and Still Just a Geek. I've spent a great deal of time with myself when I was in my late 20s, and I have since. In the last couple of weeks, been spending all this time with me when I was in my late 30s. And we're two really different people. When I'm in my late 30s, my career is kind of going the way I want it to go. I feel a lot more comfortable with myself. I'm doing things that I really like. And my writing's really different. It's more relaxed. It's more conversational. And it's just interesting and weird to me to see how much I had changed from just like 28 to 38. And I hadn't actually kind of put all that stuff together until just the last few days, when I started rereading stuff from around that era. It is just the weirdest coincidence that you brought up Fox right now, because I literally was looking at that like 2 hours ago.
We're on the same wavelength, Will.
I guess so.
You've narrated dozens of audiobooks, the Ernest Cline books and The Martian being some of my personal favorites.
Oh,
What do you
thanks.
enjoy about performing narration?
I love to read. I have been a reader my entire life. When I was a kid, I just loved losing myself in these other worlds. It was a really great way to get away from the reality of my life. As I got older and read more and more and more, as I spent more time learning how to be an actor and a performer, my personal reading for pleasure began to convert in my head into like a radio play.
Oh, yeah.
I could hear the character voices. I could really see the scenery. I could feel the emotion of the characters. I don't know if that's the way other people read, but that's the way that I read. And narrating for audio lets me have the privilege of taking what happens inside my head when I read for pleasure and sharing it with another person in a way that I guess people like because they keep asking me to come back and do more. It lets me combine two things that I genuinely love. I love telling a story. I absolutely love it, whether it's mine or somebody else's. I absolutely love it. The tradition of human beings sitting together and listening to someone take them on some kind of journey, whatever that journey may be, is so beautiful and wonderful and timeless. And I love that I have the privilege to have a spot in that continuum of storytellers in my work as an audiobook narrator. I just absolutely love it.
And you narrated Still Just a Geek as well. But if
I did.
You couldn't narrate Still Just a Geek, who would you want to be the voice of Wil Wheaton and why?
Honestly, I would not choose anyone else to do that. An enormous part of my personal story, an enormous part of Just a Geek and Still Just a Geek is that my entire life, I didn't have the fundamental human right of my own voice speaking for me. Somebody else was always speaking for me. The reason I started my blog in 2000 was because I was so fed up with an entire lifetime of being coached by my mom to tell this story to publicists, to tell this story to the teen magazines, to go along with the lie, to be the product she was selling to fund her lifestyle. And I just got really tired of that. I needed to, it's almost like I needed to have this primal scream that was like, I am a person. And I started out with a blog, and Still Just a Geek is at this moment sort of one of what I think will be more than a couple of culminations of all that work and all that effort that I put in. And there are people I love. There are friends who I adore. There are people who I absolutely cherish, who I think are magnificent. If they were to tell my story, something would absolutely be lost. And I know that because when I wrote my story down, when I wrote Still Just a Geek, which in the annotations, I talk about the single most traumatizing event in my entire life. I talk about things that are deeply personal and wonderful and deeply personal and terrible. When I wrote it, I was hoping that I would find some kind of catharsis that would be part of this journey of healing all of the trauma I experienced as a child and well into my 20s. I didn't get that as a writer. I got it as a narrator. It all happened when I narrated the book. It was it was unexpected. It was very surprising. It was extremely emotional, and it all came out. So I know that the writing of it and the telling of it are two very different things. And I have heard from professional psychologists and professional psychotherapists that is a reality of therapy. I don't know what it is, but writing things down does one thing. Saying them out loud does something more that is typically more profound than the writing. And that was my experience.
In 2017, you wrote a short story for the Star Wars anthology From a Certain Point of View.
I did. I loved that.
And of course, there's a long-running feud or competition, whatever you want to call it, between the two. As a fan of everything geek, what do you like about Star Wars more than Star Trek and vice versa?
Star Wars is space fantasy. The Force is magic. The Jedi are wizards. I love that about Star Wars. I also saw Star Wars in 1977 when I was 5. Like, it made an incredible impression on me. I grew up playing with Star Wars figures until the late 80s. Like, it was just an enormous part of my life. I absolutely despise the prequels, and I am not a fan of the current releases after Rogue One. That said, for other people who love them, awesome. I'm thrilled that you love them. Everybody gets to like their thing their own way. And the idea that you have to choose Star Wars or Star Trek is ridiculous to me. I've rejected that my whole life. I remember being a kid, and there was always someone. It was rarely another kid. It was usually an older person trying to get us to like stand in a box, right? Like, are you in the Star Wars box, the Star Trek box? And I was like, how about if I'm a nerd and love science fiction box? Like, that's great. The thing that I absolutely love about Star Trek that is very, very different from Star Wars. Star Wars is escapist entertainment, and I adore it. I cherish it. Star Trek is super inspiring. Star Trek tells morality plays. Star Trek very subtly illustrates and supports and inspires diversity, tolerance, collaboration, working together, the value of every person's existence that is inherent to them, regardless of their race, their gender, their species, all that. Star Trek says all of that. Star Trek is maybe the most progressive, most forward-looking, most inspiring science fiction in the history of science fiction. And that makes it, in that case, very, very different from Star Wars. I love them both. They are absolutely not in a competition with one another. And I know that there's a lot more in the Star Wars world, huge expanded universe stuff that I've just never paid attention to. So I apologize, Star Wars nerds. I love you. I just don't love it the same way you do. I will tell you that story I wrote From a Certain Point of View,
yeah,
I got an email from their editor. Do you want to write a thing? And I said, yeah, I'd absolutely love to. And the way I remember it, the editor was like, awesome. Unfortunately, the book's really filling up. So you can't really you can only have like around 5,000 words or something like that. I was like, okay, I think I know what to do. And in 2017, we were at the beginning of Donald Trump's fascist nightmare. And I was thinking a lot about collaborators and people who know better, who just kind of go along with the empire, who are stand-ins for fascists in the Star Wars universe, and what that kind of meant. And it was one of those examples of writing fiction to process and address and kind of deal with something awful happening in real life, which is one of those things I think science fiction does really, really well.
Different subject here, but you were in so many great episodes of The Big Bang Theory. You had the Wesley Kahn episode, the Wesley Crushers bowling competition, the serial apist, and who could forget the Sheldon Amy wedding? What was your favorite memory or moment from the series?
Gosh, there's so many. I was talking yesterday about how it's real hard for me to do ranked lists, because I tend to put things into like, these 5 things were super amazing, and like it's so hard to pick a single one. I don't know what my absolute favorite thing is, but I will tell you a story about working on The Big Bang Theory that I believe will be amusing to you. It's about the episode with the wedding. So the way we do production, we come in Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, and we sit around they push like 6 long, skinny banquet tables together to make one giant table. And around that table, about 40 people sit around that table: writers, executives, networks people, studio people, and all of us actors from the show. I have always sat in one particular seat that is across from Jim, next to Kunal, and next to Simon. That's where I've always sat.
Kind of like Sheldon himself.
I guess so, yeah. So on this particular morning, I come in to do the table read, and it's for the wedding episode. And we all know that Mark Hamill is coming to be in the stage that day. All of us know that. And as I go into the stage, Nikki Laurie, who is one of the assistant directors, she also directed many episodes. She's amazing. Nikki was assistant directing on that episode, and she says, I moved your seat this morning. And I said, oh, did I do something wrong? And she says, no, I just moved your seat because I thought you would prefer to sit in this other chair today. And I was like, oh, okay. So I go and take my new seat, which is on the opposite end of the table, on the opposite side of the table from where I usually sit. There's an empty seat next to my chair, and in front of that is a nameplate that says Mark Hamill. Nikki walks over and says, yeah, I just sat you next to Mark Hamill. I just thought you'd like that. And I was like, well, Nikki, you're getting a gift basket this Hanukkah. So Mark Hamill comes in. And like, oh my God, I'm sitting next to Mark Hamill. I can't believe this is happening. We're rehearsing the thing. We get to the scene where Mark Hamill and Wil Wheaton meet each other. And Wil Wheaton says something like, oh, you're the guy they got to replace me. I'm Wil Wheaton. And Mark Hamill goes, I'm sorry, who are you? It's a really funny bit in the show. So we get to that part of the scene. And Mark, who is sitting next to me, says, I'm sorry, who are you? The entire room explodes into laughter. It's a funny line. The delivery is really funny. Before the next line can be said, Mark sits up in his chair, holds up both of his hands in that everybody stop and pay attention to me kind of gesture. And he says, I want everyone to know. And he looks at me. Mark Hamill looks me in the face and he says, of course I know who you are. Of course I know who you are. I am a huge fan. And I was like, every computer meltdown lockup crash screen that you've ever seen in your life is what went on in my head. I just completely shut down and had to do a full reboot to continue on with the thing. Mark didn't have to do that. I don't believe he would have said it if it weren't true. And the thing about him that I love, and the reason this comes up, this particular story is, if you're of a particular generation, you know, there are people in that generation, entertainers that were real important to us. And if you have the opportunity to encounter that person, you kind of hope they'll be a particular way. You hope they don't let you down. When Adam West worked on Big Bang Theory, he was exactly who we wanted him to be. Bob Newhart was the same way. It was just like, oh, you're legends who have done this forever. Do you want to tell stories about things? Awesome. I will sit down and just shut up and listen to you. And I got to do that, man. I got to sit down and listen to like Bob Newhart talk about being on TV in the 60s. I could listen to Adam West talk about making Batman. Like, come on, what are you talking about? This is amazing. So the thing about Mark Hamill is that he is exactly who you want him to be. He could not have been just more perfect and kind and generous and genuine and enthusiastic and lovely and wonderful. And that was a gift that he gave every single one of us on set that day.
I love that. My last question for you, with all that you've accomplished, where does Will boldly go next? What inspires you and what's on your bucket list?
For the first time in my life, I really know what I want to do as the next thing in my creative career. And it's my choice, it's my work, it's my focus. I haven't really experienced that before. I've had experiences in my life where I've thought, well, I hope this happens, or, you know, maybe I audition for this thing and it comes down, or maybe I, you know, have this idea to make a thing and it kind of comes together. But it's always been with the sense of like, I hope it's not taken away from me. I hope somebody doesn't tell me I can't do this before it's finished. I've spent a lot of my life just trying to figure out who I am, trying to find out what my identity is, what's important to me. I couldn't do that until I very sadly and regretfully had to just end contact with my parents because they would not let me be me. I had to be the thing. And now that I am me, what I see in my future, in my near future anyway, is this other book I want to write. Just this other thing, this idea that I had one night, and I wrote down some notes and I thought about it. And then the next day I thought about it and wrote down some notes, and I did that for a couple of months until all of a sudden I have this folder full of notes. And I think I kind of have a way to maybe turn it into a book. And the thing about that is, like, what's exciting for me is I don't care if it gets published or not. I just want to write it. I just want to do it because it's going to be creatively and emotionally satisfying for me. And when I recognized that, I realized, holy shit, I'm a writer. That is what I am. Because for someone who really wants to be an actor, I mean, who just loves it, who loves it the way that my friends who have wanted it their whole lives. I grew up with Seth Green. We're still really, really good friends. He talks about how he knew when he was like 8 years old, I want to be an entertainer. I want to make people laugh. I want to make people cry. I want to be an actor. He knew, and he's pursued it his whole life. People like that don't care if they do a play and there's 2 people in the audience. It's the doing of the play that matters, not the success of it, not the audience. What was presented to me as my dream was a lie. I was turned into a tool that was exploited and used by my mother to go after her dream that she would have done for free. It was never my dream to do for free, ever. So if I did it, if I did acting, if I did a play, if I did a thing, I didn't do it because I loved it. I did it because, like, oh, it's important that this is successful, because if it's successful, then my mother will finally be happy, and maybe this is the thing that will like make my dad love me. And when I gave all of that up, I was able to say yes to a couple of small acting projects where the character was interesting and the work would be fun, and I didn't care what happened with it. And it allowed me to just start writing things all the time and just not care what goes on with it. I had this amazing moment recently where I was like looking at kind of like social media statistics, and I was looking at Google rankings and all that stuff. And when I wrote Just a Geek 20 years ago, I was like in the top 10 on just about everything. And the stakes were extremely high. And right now, I don't think I'm even in the top 100 anywhere. And it's great because it allows me to just be honest and vulnerable and direct and frank and say the things that really matter for me, knowing that people who want to hear those things and who want to engage with me are going to do it. I don't carry around that baggage anymore that was placed on my shoulders, which was from my mom, make everybody like you because then they'll like me, and my dad, which was nothing you ever do is good enough for me. And I was like, well, I'll show you. Both of those things are just completely gone. And I'm just doing things that I really love, that I'm really happy about, that I really enjoy, that are deeply creatively satisfying. And I'm excited about it.
Well, we are too. We're very excited that you found your true self, your writing. Thank you so much, Will, for joining us here on Everything Zen. We're not just fans, we're geeks too. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for your kind words about my work.
Still Just a Geek by HarperCollins is available now on Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, and at most online and brick-and-mortar booksellers. Also, if you'd like to hear Will narrate, you're in luck, because Will has narrated Still Just a Geek as well, and it's available on Audible for download right now. For Star Trek fans, especially all of the new series on Paramount Plus, you need to be watching The Ready Room, as Will hosts the show and discusses Star Trek Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy, and Discovery with all of your favorite Star Trek cast and crew. You can watch all episodes of The Ready Room on Paramount Plus's YouTube channel and catch all 7 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation streaming today on Paramount Plus.